Good evening. We welcome you all to the book launch and opening of the exhibition Decoding Mumbai. Published by the SET University Press, this book has been authored by Samit Padora and co-authored by Shreyank Hemlapure. Through 18 case studies, the book documents and attempts to analyze the trajectories of Mumbai's building codes and the development of Mumbai's housing fabric, tracing its interrelationships with socio-political and economic currents, both domestic and international. Decoding Mumbai attempts to make explicit the evolution of Mumbai's physical form. Now I would like to request Dr. Bimal Patel to share his thoughts.
So good evening everybody. It now reminds us of what it's like really to be in Ahmedabad. Summer's here, evenings here, it's nice and warm, shall we say. And so thank you all for coming. I'll just ask a question. How come you're here? This must be a really important book. I said, no, hold on. I'm here because this is, of course, an important book because it's an extremely important topic. And I'd like to compliment both the authors for picking up this topic. You know, we have if you're an architect working in a city, and if you're half your buildings form, more than half your buildings form is designed by the building codes. Things are decided way before you ever get to the problem. That's the DNA of the city. The codes are what constrain you. They decide what you cannot do. And I know this intimately from experience. When I started working in Ahmedabad, the situation, this was a long time ago, I'm not going to say exactly when, but maybe early 90s, late 80s. The situation was terrible, truly terrible. The architects had to negotiate a maze of incredibly complicated building bylaws. They were highly restrictive and totally illiberal. They were shaping buildings in very, very perverse sort of ways. If I have to give an example, it's something like this. They were exactly, those codes in Ahmedabad were exactly like the excise rules were, excise regulations were before GST came in. So the excise laws were so complicated, full of many contradictory rules, lots of specific items in there, and you needed specialist lawyers to negotiate that maze, that tangle of excise rules. And the only job of the excise lawyer of yours was to find loopholes that you could exploit to pay less excise. They were highly illiberal, highly restrictive, the excise duties were high, they didn't allow you to really make, they were designed to stop you from making any simple system. If your factory unit went above a certain size, then the advice of the excise lawyer was, well, create another company, build a compound wall between your factories, create two companies, separate out the goods, go from one to the other, completely convoluted, roundabout ways in which to organize your business. You could not organize your business based on either financial logic or the logic of production. Those excise lawyers would tell you how to move things, etc. Convoluted stuff like that. And the architects of Ahmedabad of the early 90s had become nothing but excise lawyers who were looking for loopholes to exploit to increase the FSI. That was all their job was. So you had to design buildings where half the floor plate could be passed as a balcony. Then you had to make a building that was convoluted, had a large periphery. The floor plate periphery was large so that you could make a lot of balconies. Then those balconies are project out. You couldn't make a column below. There are many buildings in Ahmedabad still standing which are the result of those bylaws. You can see that those bylaws made those buildings. And the architects, it turned the architects into nothing but excise lawyers looking for loopholes. So they're just doing that. Fortunately in Ahmedabad, we got a set of reforms in 99. This doesn't happen very often in the country. We got a set of reforms. And in the way that GST streamlined and simplified the excise regime, many complications were removed. The bylaws were made simpler to follow, and the bylaws were, and a more liberal attitude towards FSI was adopted. As a consequence of that, many of you who are from that time, you will completely agree that all the excise lawyer architects went out of business. And a whole new crop of architects emerged who could now use their creativity not to find loopholes to increase FSI, quasi-legal loopholes, but ended up using their creativity to make the right solution for the project. Which is why in Ahmedabad, when you go around just now, you will find that there are, when you go to the Rajpath side, the new buildings that are coming up, it's a pleasure to see the buildings that are coming up. There's much innovation, even now the bylaws could be much simpler than they are, but they are so much better. And the good architecture that you see on that side is a result of and I'm talking mainstream architecture. I'm not talking about boutique buildings on sept like this library and things like that. You can do that sort of stuff. A city is not made up of sept libraries. That's not the only thing there is in architecture. 80% of the buildings operate within tight constraints of the bylaws, and that's what needs to be better if our cities are to be better. I also love our library, and I think that's a great piece of work, great piece of architecture, but architecture is much more than just small boutique projects of that sort. It has to affect the mainstream. That's what has to improve. I was with a student in the planning school. I was supporting somebody in guiding their thesis. And we were looking at the reforms done in 1999. And we found in the treasure that Auda has, a booklet talking about how they are going to simplify the bylaws. Actually, it was intended set of reforms, it was done purposefully, and it changed the face of Ahmedabad. I think many such reforms are needed. Because it's not just the form of buildings, not just the design of buildings that is affected by the bylaws, but one extremely important thing that is affected by bylaws is the affordability of buildings. You see, we are all very eager to add more and more bylaws that raise the standard of building. Every time you add a bylaw that asks for higher standard, you're also increasing the cost of the building. So one of the things that our bylaws need to do is to say what is the cheapest legal building you can build in Ahmedabad. If I add one more rule, that threshold is going to go higher. If I add another rule, that threshold is going to go higher. If I add more and more high standards, if I insist on more and more high standards, the threshold of the legal house is going to go up. You know what's going to happen? Another set of Ahmedabadis are not going to be able to afford. Every time I raise the threshold, a whole bunch of families in Ahmedabad will not be able to afford a legal house and they will live in a slum. Slums are absolutely the creation of bylaws. They're that important. You just have to see progressive cities where bylaws allow truly inexpensive and affordable standards type of housing in other cities. Everybody can't afford the same high standards. There are many, many poor people in Ahmedabad, and there will be for the coming 20 years, 30 years. As more and more people come in from the villages, always be people with low incomes. And if we keep raising the bar high, this is not going to work. I think that as a community, we are so distracted by a certain set of concerns that we don't pay enough attention to building bylaws. I've never seen a mainstream architect who does sophisticated, fine buildings interested in bylaws that is this book, in a sense. Who truly understands that you can do some nice. He's done a fantastic temple. He's done a beautiful children's center. He's done all. You can do one or two or three of these, and you can keep publishing them in foreign magazines or Indian magazines. But that's not going to improve Indian cities. What's going to improve Indian cities is if the standard buildings change, the apartments change, the low-cost housing changes, the office building changes, and to do that. It's not going to help to do yet another fine small building. It's only going to help if you change the bylaw. It's an extremely important topic. Unfortunately, SEPT has paid almost zero attention to this. There's almost none. Show me one study that looks at bylaws. We have a great school of architecture, but we have paid no attention to this issue because we have been so preoccupied with a certain kind of architecture that we have not paid attention to this. So it's truly terrific that you're launching your book from here, Samir. It's really, really important that you're doing it because it gives a message to SEPT saying, listen, guys, what really needs to be worked on is this. You really need to analyze how building bylaws work today. You need to get involved, engaged, and get a control of the building bylaws in the city. That's what you really need to do. If you are not controlling the building bylaws of the city, you are not controlling the architecture of the city. You cannot train architects. Those architects go out, they'll have to work within those constraints, but those constraints are what you have to work on. So that's an agenda for research, for engagement, for advocacy. We in fact end up doing the opposite. In our zeal to save the environment, we add another 2 bylaws to improve standards. Rainwater harvesting karo, uske baad add some green, make it a green building, and usko you make it energy efficient. Each thing, if you need a bylaw, it means it is costly. If it was not costly, people would do it themselves. And we keep adding bylaw after bylaw that will increase the cost of buildings, without concern for creating perhaps a separate regime. I don't say that all buildings need to be of poor quality or lower quality. Perhaps we can have 3 sets of bylaws instead of 1 set of bylaws. Those who can will have chapatis, others will have bread, and the rest can have cake. And your building can see this is a cake type building, bread type building, chapati type building. But chapati banne to do. Why are you making chapatis illegal? And that's what the important thing is. So with that, I've said already too much. It's not my book. I wish I had worked on such a book. Though I have changed more bylaws than you have. So extremely important. Thank you very much for doing this work, Samir. And I forget names. I'm losing it in my old age. Say it loud. Shreyank, yes. He's now part of us, but sorry, Samir. Thank you for letting him go and bringing him here. But Shreyank, thank you very much for launching your book from here. And I'm done with what I have to say. Thank you very much. It's extremely important topic. Glad you are here. Glad you are doing this. Terrific.
Thank you, Bimal Bhai, for your valuable insights. The author Samit Padora is the principal architect and founder of Mumbai-based studio SP+A, Samit Padora and Associates, and SPARE, a research initiative that investigates urbanization and architecture in India. His practice believes that India's vast breadth of socio-cultural environments require multiple modes of practice and process to engage with the country's diverse contexts. He is the author of How to Build an Indian House, In the Name of Housing, and a recipient of several awards. He is also the co-founder of Bandra Collective, a group of 6 architects engaged with the design of public spaces in Mumbai. I would request Samit Padora to come and share his experience.
Thank you for this. Yeah. I can just, is it okay if we take it in? Yeah, that's fine. All right. Okay. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. Thanks, Vimal, for that introduction to the book. But I've got to also tell you, I mean, all that the introduction sounds very serious, but I've had a really interesting and fortuitous start to the day. When I took the flight from Mumbai, as I finished my security, I actually bumped into an old friend of mine, Bijoy Jain, who's one end of the residential architecture spectrum. And as I sat on the plane to take off to come to Ahmedabad, sitting right next to me was Mr. Hafiz Contractor, who was the other end of the residential architecture spectrum. So it's really been an interesting start to the day. No, thankfully I didn't have that to contend with. But what really was interesting, and in our kind of discussion that first joined with then with Hafiz, what really was interesting to see is exactly what you were talking about, this architectural background, right, that creates 60 to 70% of your city. And the fact that while in our previous research projects, which includes In the Name of Housing, we looked at housing types in the city of Mumbai and how they were built so sensitively back in the day, starting 1896 till about the early 70s, and the fact that it didn't happen anymore. And what Shreyank, Ayushi were wondering is, why doesn't this still work? And the answer was very simple. It's just the building codes. They don't let you do anything. That's anything that can be sensitive, that can be efficient, or just kind of cater to the market that or to the residents and what they need. So what we said is, let's just go back and start looking at how building codes in Mumbai evolved. And in some sense, that scripted the history of Mumbai through this lens of building code. So it actually told us exactly what happened and how Mumbai went from the first bylaws being about creating good living conditions for people, about light and ventilation. Every bylaw was actually a graphical bylaw, so it made it very evident, to a point where it becomes so entrenched in layers of code that it becomes completely opaque, and you need specialists to kind of decipher. To a point where those same building bylaws today create environments where rooms face each other in 40-story buildings just 10 feet away from each other, creating adverse living conditions. So rules have gone from being written about creating better life, better living conditions, to then creating adverse living conditions. So we were just kind of interested in mapping that entire journey, and then to see what trajectories lie ahead of us in the future. What do building codes have to contend with as we kind of look at the future? So that's really a kind of very broad description of the book, and in some sense, each of these case studies were interesting. They were kind of unique in the way that they presented a particular aspect of the bylaw as it evolved at that particular point of time. What were its compulsions that caused that to happen, and what was the resultant fabric that developed? So really, it's and you know, as researchers or people who are interested in architecture, there is no urban artifact really. You know, it's the architecture, the background as such. But yet, like Bimal also mentioned earlier, that it actually ends up creating your city. And unless you're able to kind of address this, understand at least before addressing, understand, analyze, and then address this, there is no future for the city as such. And that's exactly what we've tried to do. And thank you for hosting us here. And I'm delighted that the book launches at SEPT. Thank you.
Thank you, Samit, for sharing your wonderful experience. The co-author, Shreyank Hemalapure, is an associate professor at SEPT University. Prior to this, he was an assistant professor at the School of Environment and Architecture, Mumbai. He has worked as a research coordinator at SPARE and is currently pursuing his doctoral studies at the European Graduate School. His interests lie at the intersection of architecture, art, urbanism, and continental philosophy. I would request Shreyank to come here and say a few words about the book.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Professor Bimal Patel, and thank you, Sameep. So I have three things to say very broadly. I'll try to keep it short so that we can all head to the opening of the exhibition and then to the food. The first thing is that 6 years ago, Sameep invited to join the research wing of SPARE, and the journey really started 6 years back in that sense. And after a lot of explorations and ambitious, kind of imaginations of what this research could be, we really kind of we had a very humbling moment in the first conference of state of housing that happened, the inaugural conference, where we saw a lot of experts who have really spent 2 to 3 decades working on this subject, had so much to say, and then we thought that we need to really narrow down our focus, and that's where this book really kind of focused on back in Mumbai, and this is what has resulted from that kind of narrowing down. And so thank you, Sameep, for really trusting us and the team to kind of really make this possible. So for today, I thought like maybe I can just help briefly situate the project vis-a-vis other works that have happened on Mumbai, which is a lot. So I'll just read out from the book, which helps you kind of situate this study a little bit. So to quote from the book, there's a vast body of work produced on the history of planning in Mumbai, from which a study borrows and further builds upon. There are important works like Mariam Dosal's Theatre of Conflict, City of Hope, which covers planning efforts in Mumbai between 17th century to 20th century. Similarly, Sharda Dwivedi's and Rahul Mehrotra's book, Bombay, The Cities Within, through archival material offered historical insights into the various phases of development of the city. Recently, Nikhil Rao's House But No Garden examines the early period of suburbanization of Mumbai. Rao's book, or Nikhil's book rather, also opens the blurred power relationship in colonial Mumbai and the ways in which European modernity met with a lot of resistance in the city. Then Kamu's Boom Bay really kind of got us inspiring to kind of first of all take a graphical journey to kind of translate the regulations into some sort of graphical way so that it's easier to communicate whatever we are writing in the text. So then you get two kinds of audience to really address: those who can read and want to read and spend more time, and those audience who kind of really want to look at an image and understand those 1,000 words. No, they're not 1,000 words. You understand what I'm saying. But I think the most important document that we really stumbled upon was J.P. Orr's 1915 catalog, or let's say a manual for how to show the implications of regulations on Mumbai. And the manual was titled "How to Check the Insanitary Growths in the City of Mumbai." And that really the best thing that that document did back in 1915 was to draw the sections of the new bylaws that would be applied, both on the new parts of the city as well as the old parts of the city. So what adjustments both have to make in order for those bylaws to be implemented in the city. And I think that gave us a lot of confidence in continuing the journey to draw out whatever we are saying through specific case studies and not make it very abstract also. Like, this is the real impact of this particular bylaw. So that was, let's say, the kind of method that we applied. I would like to maybe just, before I move on to the third point, add an anecdote that during the first exhibition that we had a retired High Court judge who came by and he said a very interesting thing to Sameep. He said that what the study does best is to offer a visual tool for the people who actually pass judgments on cases related to bylaws, because they can't visualize their judgments and their implications on the built environment. So for instance, in litigation cases, when you pass a judgment, you don't know what an FSI 4 would mean, and that it's okay to have a 10 feet distance between a 40-story building. So I think that was probably a best compliment that we could get for this project that we've done so far. I think reinforces our efforts also. The last thing that I wanted to say on the prospect that there are many students and young graduates who are in the crowd, that probably we are in a moment where I think it's a good time to be a researcher in the field of architecture today, primarily because I think we are in a strangely and interestingly self-aware, let's say a moment of self-awareness. Like, we want to look back at our own history, We want to understand, let's say, the ways in which histories are written. We want to understand who writes those history, etc., etc., etc. And I think there's a lot of projects that are springing up and that will spring up, and it will require people who are trained in doing research, no, in that sense. So I think in that sense, CEPT is offering those courses, so it's good to see that happening. And on that note, I think CEPT University Press is also situated in a very interesting historical moment because it is contributing to that, the shift that is taking place. And so on that note, I would like to thank CEPT University Press for taking up this project, and that's my 2-bit for this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shreyank. Please stay back. I would like to request Samir Padora, Bimal Bhai, and Tridip Bhai to come and release the book. Thank you. I would now request Professor Jai Thakkar to give vote of thanks.
Hi, good evening everyone. I'll just take a little bit time because I'm very sure that people are eager to see the exhibition and waiting to have the food, which is right behind. So we have done multiple exhibitions till now, semester end exhibition, research exhibitions, exhibitions from works of professionals. The challenging task for putting up an exhibition is not really design, curation or logistics, but the biggest challenge is working in collaboration. When you put multiple people with a kind of a creative mindset, all in the same room, it can become kind of quite spicy. So this time we had a collaboration, for this exhibition with the team of SPARE, SPN Place A, and it was a kind of a long distance relationship that we had, but we managed to pull it quite well. Right? So we would like to thank the Samir Padora for actually allowing CEPT to host the entire exhibition over here along with the book launch. So we are very happy about that. We would like to thank Shreyank, Ayushi and the SPARE and the SPA team, to help in setting up the entire exhibition. We also would thank Philip Kalia, Sunil Thakkar, who have taken the photographs that you will see in the exhibitions, as well as Vincent Francis from Jack Printers for his support in this exhibition. This entire exhibition and the book launch, especially the book, would not have happened without the help of the CEPT University Press, handled by Tridip, Namrata and Rucha. And I would like to especially thank my exhibition team. So Rishabh, Chandni, Junaid, Namrata, Bipin, Heaven, who have been working relentlessly from exhibition to exhibition, and now the exhibitions are continuously increasing. We thank communication team, Santosh, Hemant, Antara, Jayesh for coming out with a wonderful, lovely digital media campaign. The CEPT workshop staff headed by Kavlav has been instrumental in executing the exhibition and providing the skill support. But one of the things that this exhibition's invisible backbone is the team of these 3 different offices, which is the campus office headed by Bhargav, and the entire team, the IT office headed by Maruf, and the administrative office headed by Anitaben. So we'd like to thank them and the entire team, and especially Hansaben for basically the flower decoration which she does every time. So I would like to thank especially all of you for coming of this. One important thing that after we inaugurate the exhibition, there will be book signing and the book will be available over here, and there will be refreshment. So, yes, the books are available for sale. Yes, not a free copy with the refreshment, right? The refreshments are free. So we can all go to the main door for the inauguration of the exhibition. Thank you.
Excellent.